As we near the end of 2024, there are some things you need to take into consideration now before you start planning your budget for 2025. We all tend to think of planning our budget as something happening the first week of January. You take a deep breath, holidays are over, and you take a deep dive into your finances and figure out what your plans are for the 12 months after that. But there are really some things that will help set you up for success in 2025 if you'll just take a second, take a look at those areas now. There are 4 areas we'll talk about in this video. We'll give you examples from our own budgeting process. But first, if you don't know us, I'm Hope.
And I'm Larry.
This is Under the Median, where every week we talk about practical frugality. Now, before we dive in, we should tell you this is part 1 of a 4-part video series. And the purpose of this video series is to help set you up for success in your budgeting in 2025. And we promise to do it in a way that makes sense and it will work for you.
The first thing that we're all going to need to do is set up a projected budget for 2025. This will give you an idea of what the budget's going to look like. It's not really etched in stone. It's just a preliminary budget.
Now, the easiest way to do this is to look at what you've spent so far in 2024. We have budget spreadsheets that we use. And at the end of the year, we fill in all of our budget categories and what we spent in each budget category in the preceding 12 months. If you don't have something like this to look at, what you want to do is go get your last 2 months of bank statements. Then you're going to grab 3 different colored highlighters. You're going to use those highlighters to highlight on those bank statements 3 different specific categories. You want to look at what we call our big 3. Transportation, anything that would be an expense that's related to your car, be that paying your car insurance or filling up your tank. The second category is housing. Housing encompasses a lot of territory.
It does.
Housing encompasses everything from your mortgage or your rent payment to perhaps your yearly property tax payment. And it also includes any utilities. And most of the time people put their cell phone bill in that as well. Now, the third big 3, not surprisingly, is food. From our experience, the vast majority of the expenses that we make every month are definitely related to food. You're going to highlight each of those 3 areas in a different highlighter. You're going to see that about 80 to 90% of all of your expenses are encompassed in those 3 areas. We call them the big 3 because these are the areas that you need to pay every single month. When we look at our budget, we want to create a prioritized budget, which means the most important things, the big 3, go all the way at the top of the budget. There'll be a few things that you didn't highlight, but for our purposes, what you really want to determine is what you're paying the majority of your money out for every single month. You want to know what you'll spend throughout the year. Add up all of those expenses, multiply it by 6, and you'll have a pretty good estimate.
One of the things you'll want to look for is, have you gone over in your budget? And if you've gone over, you're going to have to make some adjustments next year for that. Or have you gone under in your budget? Maybe you didn't spend as much money as you thought you were going to. So these are the kind of things you're going to look at as you're setting up your projected yearly budget.
Now, if you've never set up a budget before and you don't have amounts assigned to each of those budget categories, what you're going to do is look at the amount that you spent for 2 months and ask yourself, are you happy with the amount you spent? Do you think that you could spend less, or do you believe that you overspent?
2 more considerations that you're going to look at is, did you have enough income to support all of those budget items? And have those items gone up in costs since then?
In 2024, we saw a lot of our budget categories that went up. It was not anything that we personally had any control over.
No.
But looking at those items now gives us plenty of headway to be able to figure out how we're going to move budget amounts around in order to be able to continue to afford the rising costs in each of the budget categories that are going up.
The other thing that you need to look at are some flexible items. Are there some things in that budget that could be eliminated, and that will help you pay for those rising costs?
Now, the next area you're going to look at is which of your budget categories are you going to designate as sinking funds? We'll talk about sinking funds, what they are, and we'll show you our sinking funds for 2024. But first, I want to let you know that all of the forms that you'll see on this video, those are available. They are in our Frugal Finance Planner Super Pack. Twice a year, we open up our Frugal Finance Planner and we add 4 additional high-value bonuses. The cost doesn't go up. You just get a whole lot more information for the same price. Now that opens the first week of January, but this year we're doing something a little bit different. We have a wait list. Those who are on the wait list will get information, incentives, and even some freebies from Larry and I leading up to that sale. So you want to make sure you're on the wait list because that's where all the cool kids are hanging out and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'll leave a link to sign up for the wait list in the description of this video.
So let's get down to what are sinking funds. And there's some really good definitions that help clarify what they are. Basically, a sinking fund is a fund that you can set up at the very beginning of the year that you say, we're going to save this amount of money. Mm-hmm. And as that money is needed, you subtract it from that fund as you go. These are for funded items that are not necessarily your monthly items, like your light bill or your gas bill,
right.
The ones that are expected to come every month. These are some things that are a little bit more flexible that way, that you got some money kind of floating in a fund, but you have a specific amount that you've allocated toward it.
You save a little bit of money over a longer period of time in order to make sure that you have enough to pay for those bills when they come due. We'll give you some examples. These are our actual 2024 sinking funds. And you can see that we included a lot of different sorts of things as sinking funds.
The first one that we have is home maintenance. That can be a large amount of money depending on what you're planning on doing with your home. We have $1,800 that we have allocated toward that. Car upkeep. And the reason why we put car upkeep in there is that it's a varying amount. It may not be a real fixed amount to keep maintenance going on your car. You might need brakes. You might need tires. There might be something that you need that's something you really can't necessarily plan for, but you've got the money for it. Fun is a category that we use for maybe going out to eat or buying something that's fun that we don't have it in another category. So clothing is another item. I won't go through all of them, but you can see these are items that aren't really fixed items.
And you'll notice we also use sinking funds to pay for our insurance payments, which we pay only once a year. A sinking fund can also be used for a one-time event. You'll notice all the way at the bottom of our sinking funds, we have James and Hannah's wedding. As soon as they got engaged, we started saving up money to help pay for the wedding. But that's an example of really looking ahead and saying, what is coming up on the horizon that I know I'm going to need to save some money for, and then use that fund slowly over an amount of time to pay for expenses related to that specific event.
If you'd like a little bit more detailed information on sinking funds, Hope and I did a video on this. We did a dedicated whole video on just sinking funds that will kind of fill in the gaps if you have some questions. And we'll leave that in the description of this video, and we'll have it linked right here above. You can click on that.
The third thing we want you to spend some time thinking about right now before we get to 2025 are what we call cash flow goals. These are not sinking funds. These are things that we really want, and we save up money over time. And as soon as that goal is funded, then we can spend the money. We have an example of several of ours.
One category in this area is my biking fund. I allow $300 a year for bike parts. This might be new tires. It might mean a brake adjustment, a derailleur adjustment, and some work that might need to be done on the bike. It's not a bike replacement fund. It's just a maintenance fund. And we don't have a category for that, so we do a cash flow toward that one.
Now, the reason John and Delaney's wedding is on this, guys, is because he didn't propose until about 3/4 of the way through the year. We had 6 months to save up the money to help toward their wedding costs. So rather than put it as a sinking fund, we just immediately started chunking money away for that goal so we would have enough, because they started planning pretty early. And we're like, okay, we need to figure out, we did a couple of little side hustles, sold a couple of things in order to fund this super quickly. So that's sort of what in our mind delineated it really as a cash flow goal rather than a a sinking fund.
You'll see a cash flow goal that's car tires. This was for my car, for my Honda Fit. It needed a whole set of tires. This is not our regular scheduled car upkeep. We don't consider that in there because it's a very expensive thing to put on your car. So we did a cash flow on that, and we paid in cash for that, and it's all paid for. It's got 4 new tires on it.
Really, if there's anything that you're thinking I need to replace, and it's going to be like a larger item. Let's say you're going to get new living room furniture, or you're going to have to replace an HVAC system. That is a huge goal. It's hard to set that aside as a sinking fund and fund it through your regular budget.
It is.
Really, these goals are an additional money that came in outside of our budget that we needed to set aside quickly for these goals.
The fourth area that we're going to talk about is planning for big purchases.
We just alluded to this, talking about big things that may be on the horizon. The last quarter of the year, you've got about 10 weeks left before we hit 2025. This really is the time you need to start looking around and saying, what am I going to need to replace in 2025? Make a list of those. That's where we're at this point, is just making our list. But here's why that's important. Because if you're going to do this, say early in 2025, you want to start doing your research right now. You want to narrow it down to make, model. That's how you set ultimately your budget for that big item that you're going to have to purchase. And then also it allows you to maybe peruse the upcoming Black Friday sales. If it's something that will go on sale during Black Friday and it's a small enough amount of money that you can set that money aside really quickly. And that's why I tell people to figure out this list really the last quarter of the year rather than waiting until January. Now, earlier in this video, we gave you kind of a really quick tutorial on how to set up your proposed budget for 2025. But if you feel like you really need a little bit more in-depth information on budgeting, we did a step-by-step tutorial that shows you how we set up our budget every single month in 30 minutes or less. And that video is right over there.